Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction inspired by dramatic themes of love, betrayal, and emotional conflict. Any resemblance to actual people, events, or places is purely coincidental. It is written for entertainment purposes only and may contain mature themes that are not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. The intent of this story is not to promote or glorify infidelity or inappropriate relationships, but to explore the emotional complexities people may face in romantic and professional situations. It started like any other transition in life. My husband, Thomas, had recently accepted a prestigious promotion at a top marketing firm headquartered downtown. The pay was incredible, the benefits were unmatched, and it felt like everything we had worked for was finally within reach. But I didn't know then that this new job would unlock a door I never intended to open. Thomas became busier, often leaving early and returning late. At first, I supported him wholeheartedly. I cooked his favorite meals, pressed his suits, and listened patiently when he'd vent about tight deadlines or last-minute pitches. But over time, his presence in our home grew fainter. He was physically there, yes, but emotionally he was drifting. Our dinner conversations shrank to one-word responses. Our weekend outings became quiet afternoons on opposite ends of the couch. And intimacy, it had become a distant memory. One evening, he came home talking endlessly about his new boss, Mr. Julian Walker. A sharp, elegant man in his early 40s, single, rich, and known for closing million-dollar deals like they were everyday tasks. Thomas admired him, perhaps even idolized him. I'd hear about how Mr. Walker led with confidence, how the office lit up when he entered, how clients trusted him blindly. And for some strange reason, I found myself curious, maybe even intrigued, about this man I had never met. Then came the company gala. It was a lavish black tie event at a luxury hotel, and spouses were invited. I spent the afternoon preparing, curling my hair, carefully applying makeup, and slipping into a dress that Thomas had once loved but hadn't complimented in years. Maybe I thought this evening could reignite something between us. But when I arrived at the gala, that's when I first saw him. Julian Walker. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes and a voice that commanded attention without raising a tone. He shook my hand with a warmth that lingered and complimented my dress before my own husband did. I should have thought nothing of it. I should have dismissed the butterflies. But that night something shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore, and that, unknowingly, was the beginning of something dangerous. After the gala, I couldn't get him out of my head. Julian Walker. There was something about the way he looked at me, not like I was someone's wife or an accessory to a corporate party, but like I was a woman, a real woman, seen, noticed. I tried to shake the feeling off, convinced it was just harmless attention. But deep inside, I already knew. I was craving something I hadn't felt in years: validation. A few days later, Thomas called me unexpectedly during lunch. Julian wants to take us out for dinner. Just the three of us. He says he likes to get to know his employees' families personally, he said, sounding a little nervous, almost honored. Dinner was scheduled at an upscale rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. I arrived a little early, wanting to compose myself before facing him again. The view was stunning, but my heart raced for an entirely different reason. Julian walked in minutes later, wearing a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, confident but relaxed. He greeted Thomas with a firm handshake and me with a soft smile and a compliment about my earrings. Thomas launched into work talk almost immediately, distracted by talks of campaign numbers and upcoming pitches. But Julian, he kept stealing glances at me when Thomas wasn't looking. Subtle, harmless, almost respectful. But I felt them. Midway through dinner, Thomas received a work call and excused himself for a few minutes. That's when the air shifted. "You really do light up a room," Julian said, leaning in just enough to make me feel like he had entered my personal space. I laughed nervously. "You're charming. I'm sure you say that to all your employees' wives." "Actually, no," he replied without hesitation. "Most of them bore me to death. You don't." There was a pause, an electric silence charged with tension. Then Thomas returned, completely unaware of the strange current now flowing between his boss and his wife. The rest of the night passed smoothly, but I was no longer really present. My thoughts were spinning, looping around one central question I couldn't escape. Why did that feel so good? Back at home, I expected Thomas to say something, about the dinner, about how I looked, about Julian's charm, but he just muttered something about needing to finish a presentation and disappeared into his study. I stood in front of the mirror that night, staring at my reflection. I hadn't changed, not really, but somehow one man's attention had shaken something loose in me. The next morning, I found a message on my phone. Unknown number. It was lovely seeing you last night. Hope we cross paths again soon, Jay. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. I should have deleted it, but I didn't. Days turned into weeks, and that message from Julian remained in my phone, unread yet burned into my memory. I hadn't replied. I told myself it was innocent, that I was just curious, flattered even. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was waiting to see if he would message again, waiting for the excuse to feel something again. It came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Julian, I'll be stopping by the office later. Thought I'd offer Thomas a ride. Will you be home? I hesitated before typing back. Me, yes. Just finishing up errands. Why? Julian. Maybe I just like knowing you're around. That text should have been a warning bell. But instead, it felt like a spark in the quiet, gray world my life had become. I hadn't cheated. Not physically, but emotionally. I was already playing with fire. The visits began subtly. Julian would drop Thomas off and linger just long enough to exchange small talk. He brought expensive wine once, saying it was a thank you for letting him steal Thomas away for late nights at the office. He never said anything inappropriate, but his eyes always lingered just a second too long. His compliments, carefully worded, always had a double meaning. Once, while Thomas was away at a weekend retreat with his team, Julian texted, Julian. Funny how empty that house must feel without him. Hope someone is keeping you company. I didn't reply, but I didn't block him either. A few nights later, I ran into Julian at the grocery store. He looked surprised, then amused. What are the odds? He said, flashing that same crooked smile that had become far too familiar. I was just picking up some wine and pasta, I said, holding up my basket awkwardly. He looked inside and raised an eyebrow. Cooking for one? Yes, I admitted. Thomas is working late again. Julian leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You deserve more than an empty dinner table. That night, I sat alone, eating silently in front of the TV with a half-drunk glass of wine, playing that comment over and over in my head. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't kissed me. But I was already entangled. Not by force, but by choice. And I began dressing up a little more, just in case. A nicer blouse, subtle makeup, a spritz of perfume. Little things that I told myself were for me, but deep down, I knew they were for the possibility that he might see me. One evening, Julian stayed a little longer after dropping off Thomas. Thomas had gone upstairs to take a shower, and Julian stood in the doorway as I said goodnight. You know, he said, voice low, if I were your husband, I'd never leave your side. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away. The door clicked shut, but everything inside me had already opened. I knew then this wasn't harmless anymore. It was the kind of night that smelled like rain before it arrived, heavy, still electric in the air. Thomas had called to say he'd be staying overnight at the corporate condo with his team. He sounded tired, distracted, and I didn't press him. I wished him well and hung up. I was used to this by now. I sat curled up on the couch in my robe, a glass of wine in hand, reruns playing in the background. I told myself I liked the quiet, but the silence that night felt heavier, like something was coming. At 9:42 p.m., a knock echoed at the door. Not the doorbell. A knock, low, deliberate. My heart skipped. For a brief second, I thought maybe Thomas had surprised me. But when I looked through the peephole, it wasn't my husband. It was Julian. I opened the door halfway, confused. Julian. He looked damp from the mist, his hair slightly tousled, button-down clinging lightly to his chest. "Hey," he said. "Sorry. I know it's late. Is everything okay?" I asked, scanning his face for some clue. He hesitated, then exhaled. "I was driving home and realized I was near your place. I guess I just wanted to talk to someone who sees me as more than a paycheck or a punchline." I didn't answer. "I can go," he said quickly, stepping back. This was probably a mistake. Something inside me reacted. Loneliness? Curiosity? Long-suppressed desire? I don't know. But I opened the door wider. "No. Come in," I said softly. He walked in slowly, respectfully. I offered him a drink. We sat, awkward at first, on opposite sides of the couch. We talked about work, about how exhausting it was to pretend we were both okay in lives we weren't sure we even chose. I noticed how closely he listened when I spoke. How he made me laugh when I didn't think I could. How he looked at me like I mattered. Time disappeared. I didn't plan to lean in. But when he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, and our eyes met, it just happened. Our lips met gently at first. Then with urgency, hunger, years of unmet longing pouring out. My glass fell to the carpet. My robe loosened. His hands trembled. And I let it happen. There was no noise outside. No interruptions. No guilt yet. When it ended, we sat in silence. Both of us wide-eyed, breathing heavily, staring at the ceiling like strangers in the aftermath of a storm. "I should go," he whispered, standing up and avoiding my eyes. I nodded, but my voice caught. "Julian." He turned at the door, but neither of us spoke. Then he left. No goodbye, just silence. The room felt smaller. The wine bottle nearly empty. My robe slipped back over my shoulders like a blanket I didn't deserve. I sat on the floor, numb, staring at the door long after he was gone. I didn't know what scared me more. The fact that it happened, or that part of me wanted it to happen again. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, hitting my face like a judgment I couldn't avoid. I hadn't slept. Not really. I had just laid there, staring at the ceiling, the scent of him still faint on the couch cushion. My robe still on the floor where it had slipped off. I got up before the guilt could paralyze me. I scrubbed the wine glass clean, vacuumed the carpet, lit a lavender candle to chase the smell of regret. I checked the mirror. My eyes were tired, but I told myself I looked normal. That was the goal now. Look normal. Because at exactly 9:03 a.m., Thomas walked through the front door, holding a coffee for me like nothing had changed. "Morning, babe," he said with a smile. "You okay?" "Yeah." I lied. "Just didn't sleep well." He kissed my forehead and handed me the coffee. "I missed you." I smiled back, but it wasn't real. My stomach churned. For the next few days, I lived in a strange limbo. I was the same wife, the same neighbor, the same woman, but something inside me had cracked. I went through the motions, grocery shopping, replying to work emails, making dinner, while hiding the memory of Julian like a flame in my chest I couldn't put out. I told myself it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, a one-time thing. But then came the text. "Julian, can we talk?" I stared at it for 5 full minutes. My thumb hovered over the screen, shaking. I didn't reply, but I couldn't delete it either. He didn't text again. But we saw each other, of course. At the mailbox, in the hallway, at the trash bins. He looked at me the same way every time, softly, like he was holding a secret in his eyes that only we shared. One afternoon, Thomas mentioned casually, "Julian's been keeping to himself lately, huh?" I nodded, pretending not to notice the irony of the observation. Pretending I hadn't seen Julian 2 hours earlier, standing in the rain near the apartment gym, not going in, just waiting, watching. The lie grew roots in me, and that was the worst part. Not the cheating, not even the guilt, but the fact that I was getting used to it. I learned how to smile while lying, how to kiss my husband goodnight while remembering another man's hands, how to laugh at dinner parties with neighbors, including Julian's mother, pretending we were all good people living simple, safe lives. I wore the lie like perfume, invisible, but it clung to everything. And deep down, I knew Lies like this don't stay hidden forever. They rot. They spread. They come back in ways you don't expect. I just didn't know yet how mine would. Started small, like most storms do. A whisper in the hallway. A glance that lingered too long. A neighbor's smile that felt more like a smirk. First, I brushed it off. We live in a close-knit apartment complex. People love drama more than their morning coffee. But something about the way Mrs. Harper, the old widow from 3C, asked me one morning, "Everything okay at home, dear?" made my skin crawl. Then I noticed Thomas getting quieter. Not angry, just off. He'd come home and scroll through his phone for longer than usual. He'd forget to kiss me goodnight. One morning, he even left without taking the coffee I handed him. His usual routine broken. That scared me more than yelling ever could. It was Julian. I just knew it. I could feel the weight of him in the silence, in the tension thickening every corner of our home. He wasn't just the neighbor's son anymore. He was the elephant in the room, the secret walking among us, ready to explode. The final straw came during the apartment barbecue. It was a stupid event, just burgers and cheap beer in the courtyard. Everyone was there. Kids running around, people pretending they weren't watching each other. And then I heard it. Two women by the grill laughing too loudly. I heard she opened the door in just a robe. New. Yes. And he went in. Stayed in. Her husband works late, you know? My ears burned. They didn't say my name. But they didn't have to. Julian was standing 10 feet away, staring into the flame of the grill like he wanted to disappear into it. His jaw was clenched. And when our eyes met, he looked at me with a kind of sadness I couldn't explain. Like he already knew what was coming. I left early. Alone. Back in the apartment, I waited for Thomas to come back. I tried to rehearse how I'd deny it if he asked, how I'd spin it, how I'd lie better this time. But he didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next. Instead, he started sleeping on the edge of the bed, back turned. He stopped reaching for my hand. He didn't call me during his lunch breaks. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was punishment. Julian avoided me. Completely. He stopped showing up at the gym. Skipped the mailbox. I think his mother noticed, too. She always smiled politely, but there was a new distance in her voice. And me? I walked around with my heart in my throat, wondering how a single night could unravel everything I'd built over years. Not with a scream, not with a fight, but with a rumor that was true. And once truth finds a way out, it doesn't go back in. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it broke something in me. I had just finished folding laundry when I heard the door unlock. Thomas stepped inside, tired as always. But this time he didn't even glance at me. He tossed his keys on the counter and went straight to the bedroom. I followed him, not because I had anything left to say, but because the silence had grown too heavy to bear. He was sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it had answers I couldn't give. I stood in the doorway, heart thudding in my chest. Say something, I begged myself. Cry. Apologize. Just say something. But before I could, he spoke. Did anything happen that night? My mouth went dry. He didn't say what night. He didn't say with whom. But we both knew. I opened my mouth and then closed it again, because I realized in that moment, any answer would feel like betrayal. Yes, I whispered. It was the first time I'd said it aloud. The word fell like glass between us. Sharp. Irreversible. Thomas didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just nodded. Slowly. Painfully. How far did it go? I blinked. That was the real question, wasn't it? And it hit me, he didn't care about the physical act as much as the choice. The betrayal wasn't about a kiss or a touch. It was about the moment I opened the door and let him in. It wasn't physical, I said, voice trembling, but it was real. He laughed. Not a joyful laugh, more like one of disbelief. That makes it worse. And I knew what he meant. A physical act can be a mistake. But an emotional connection? That's a choice you make in silence over and over again. Do you love him? He asked. No, I said too fast. And then slower. I didn't love him. I felt seen. Thomas looked up at me for the first time in weeks. His eyes were full of something I couldn't name, something more painful than anger. "I've always seen you," he said. "You just stopped looking back." That's when I broke. I dropped to my knees in front of him, hands on his. "I'm sorry. I messed up. But I never stopped loving you." He pulled his hands away. "Sometimes love isn't enough." I spent that night on the couch, crying into silence. The air in our apartment had changed. He hadn't left, but something had. Trust. Warmth. I wanted to fix it, to claw my way back to before. But sometimes, when the line is crossed, there's no road back. There's only forward. And I had no idea what that looked like anymore. The morning after that conversation felt like the end of a long storm. The kind where the damage isn't visible right away, but you know everything's shifted. It was quiet. Too quiet. No slamming of doors, no screaming matches. Just the heavy stillness that follows a truth too big to ignore. I made coffee. 2 mugs. One for him, one for me. A habit. Muscle memory. I placed his cup where I always did, next to the keys he had carelessly thrown the night before. But he didn't come out. I sat on the couch, knees to my chest, sipping bitterness that had nothing to do with the coffee. The hours passed. He eventually emerged, showered and dressed. He had a bag in his hand. A small one. Not packed in rage, but packed intentionally. He looked at me and I looked back, waiting for a speech, for closure, for anything. But all he said was, "I'll be at my brother's." I opened my mouth to say something. "Please don't go, maybe, or let's talk." But I couldn't force the words through the lump in my throat. Instead, I nodded. Just once. He walked to the door, hesitated for half a second, then opened it. And that was it. No fight. No big goodbye. Just the soft click of a door that felt louder than any scream. I sat there for hours, unable to move. Felt surreal how fast love could disintegrate into silence. How a home could feel so empty while still being full of furniture and memories. I thought about calling him, about chasing him down the hall, begging him to come back. But some part of me knew this was a moment we both needed. Space. The opportunity to ask ourselves, what do we really want? That night I didn't cry. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of absence pressing on my chest like a boulder. I remembered the early days, the laughs, the way he held me when I was anxious, the way we used to dream together in the dark. Where did we lose it? No answer came. But maybe that was the answer. Sometimes, there isn't just one moment. Sometimes, love erodes slowly. A chipped edge here, a missed apology there, until what once felt unbreakable simply isn't. He didn't say goodbye, but I felt it. Not in the words, but in the stillness he left behind. And in that quiet, I made a promise to myself. I would sit in this pain. I wouldn't rush to numb it or rewrite the story. Because if there was even one chance to find our way back, or to find my way forward, I needed to understand what really broke us. And maybe, just maybe, rebuild from there. It's 37.